Welcome. I'm Carl Frederick, and I will be interviewing individuals for Kenosha Voices, an oral history project of the Kenosha County Historical Society in conjunction with Kenosha Community Media. I have worked in newspapers for more than 40 years as an editor and a reporter. 38 and a half of those years were at the Kenosha News. I am also a member of the Kenosha County Historical Society Board. We hope you enjoy these programs. I'm speaking with Mark Molinaro, a Kenosha Rotarian. Thank you for joining me today.
Absolutely, happy to be here. Always enjoy talking about Rotary.
Okay, so how long have you been a member?
I've been a member probably approaching somewhere near 30 years. I was just talking to a group yesterday in a different board that I'm associated with, and we went around the room talking about how long we've been on this particular committee, and those of us who can't remember tells you the fact that we just love what we do and we don't worry about the longevity or time frame involved. So somewhere approaching 30 years.
Okay, and what do you love about it?
I just enjoy the fact that Kenosha Rotary is all about getting involved in the community. It's about local projects and providing local opportunities where we can and getting involved from a volunteer standpoint. Service above self is Rotary's international mantra. And when you talk about doing things locally, anything you do locally has the opportunity to be expanded into both national and international projects, which we've been involved in heavily over our 103-year history.
And when did the club form?
Club formed April 1, as I told you last time we spoke. I think it was the best April Fool's joke that I'm aware of. April 1st of 1921. So we celebrated our 100th anniversary 3 years ago and going strong 103 years later.
Yeah. And how about Rotary itself, Rotary International?
Well, Kenosha Rotary is the second Rotary Club formed under the internet, and it wasn't under international at the time. So Paul Harris, who was the founder of Rotary, born and raised in Racine, founded the first Rotary Club, and Kenosha was in fact the second Rotary Club founded by his brother Cecil, I believe. And Rotary International came along sometime after that.
Okay, and you mentioned the mission of service above self.
Yes.
What else is the mission of Rotary? Do they have kind of a list of things that they promote or want to be involved in?
Well, they do. Certainly, it's, you know, when Rotary was formed, it was a group of businessmen, and I say men because at the time it was men. Again, as we've talked, women weren't brought into Rotary until sometime, if I recall, keeping in mind, as I mentioned, it's an awfully old club, an awfully old organization historically. If I recall, till sometime in the late 70s, mid to late 70s. So it was formed by a group of businessmen with the intention of doing philanthropic good around the community, and in our case, certainly in Kenosha. And the clubs are in various location cities around the world, in hundreds of countries across the world as well. So the intent of Rotary at that time was to form organizations that were made up of businessmen who could in fact have an impact and make a difference in the communities in which they lived and worked.
And who are its members?
Well, today our members are obviously men and women, young and old. We have had a great history and longevity of members in our club. Obviously, if you're talking about a 100-year-old organization, which has the great mission that Rotary has, and certainly the great history that Kenosha Rotary has, you have had members that have been staunch business leaders, have been public servants, have been just your average employee within organizations, big and small, throughout the community. And we continue to grow as we are currently today. And there was a time we had 160 some odd members in our club. And somewhere along the line, the two clubs broke into, or the one club broke into two clubs. So at one point we were supporting well in excess of 100 members in each club here in Kenosha.
So how does one become a member, and what are the requirements?
Well, to become a member, it is, if you follow the original rules of Rotary, or what I'll call the old school rules of Rotary, you are nominated by someone. You are typically nominated by someone without them being aware that you are without being aware personally that you're being nominated. But what we do typically now is we'll invite a prospective member, someone who may be interested in Rotary, to join us for a lunch meeting. We meet twice a month, first and third Thursdays of every month. I hesitate because we were Tuesdays for the longest time until we came back together as a single club. But we meet every first and third Thursday. We'll invite a potential member to be a guest for a meeting or two, introduce them to other members, introduce them to who we are and what we do in a little bit broader way. And then if they're inclined to continue the process, there would be an application that would be submitted on their behalf with a Rotarian who would be their sponsor, and go through the process of board support, and then we'd bring them in and induct them as a member of the club.
When you say business men and women, what types of business professional people are Rotarians?
It runs the gamut. Of course, as you know, bankers are an exceptional group for getting out and getting involved, and I smirk a little bit. I don't mean that in necessarily in a poor way, but clearly Rotary is about networking and connecting and making connections. But again, if you go back to the mantra of Rotary, service above self, it isn't about looking for opportunities to build your business by becoming a Rotarian. It is about giving back. It's about producing or finding opportunities to engage both in talent, treasure, as well as time, right? So we have a number of events that we run throughout the year. Historically, we ran a radio auction for some 50 plus years. Over 2 weekends, 16 hours of airtime to run that auction, and we raised a significant amount of money each year, as well as over the lifetime of that operation, that particular event. We ran golf outings. Rotary West, which is what they were referred to when we were two separate clubs, has run their softball tournament for decades. Similarly, those types of events are obviously, it takes a great deal of volunteer work to run them. There are funds that are raised in the end that are then through a grant process donated back out to the community to nonprofit organizations who apply through our grant process.
Okay, what I mean by professional, some people can't be Rotarians because of the nature of their work. Is that true?
I don't know that that's specifically true, other than, again, if we go back to the original rules and stringent rules, what Rotary used to be, they would only have one member from each, we'll call profession, each walk of life. So if you had personally, I'm an architect, so if I were in the club and another architect wanted to join, I would have the opportunity as a member to deny that particular application. I have not seen that happen in my tenure. So what we typically do, and started to do some time ago, and have held true to that, is, and I'll stay with architects, if you had an architect and another one wanted to join, you would create a classification, they're called. So my classification within Rotary is architect. But you could create a secondary classification that maybe addressed a specialty that either one or both of us had within our profession. So you could be an architect with a specialty in commercial work or educational work. So you've got bankers who are across the board, accountants who are across the board. Doctors is probably the easiest one. We could have any number of doctors in the club, eye doctor, foot doctor, optometrist, et cetera, right? It could just run it, and that's typically how we maintain the opportunity to keep our membership open and inviting to all that.
But I mean in terms of a teacher or someone who works for the city or the county, they're not likely to become members of Rotary because there's no classification for them, or they...
No, not at all. In fact, we have, I think there's some of what you run up against, obviously, is you need to have the flexibility to spend some time engaging in Rotary during a typical work day, I'll call it. If you don't have that flexibility, it becomes a little bit tougher. So when you talk about employees who maybe work for the city of Kenosha, as an example, a little bit more difficult potentially for them to be flexible in that work day. There's also, if you go back, there was a time when the businesses fully supported, both financially and time-wise, for anyone to be a member of Rotary. That's fallen a little bit by the wayside now, and you don't have quite the commitment there from a corporate standpoint. So it makes it a little bit more difficult for some members who might find the obligation of paying for their membership outside of their business to be able to join. You talk about teachers. I think the only issue there with a teacher would be obviously during the day they're in the classroom, so it'd be a little bit tougher.
Can't go to lunch on Thursday.
Can't go to lunch on Thursday, so it'll be a little bit tougher. They'd be welcome all day long. We have a great relationship with Kenosha Unified, and we've had that for many, many years. So teachers and administrators and educators in general are welcome anytime in Rotary.
You mentioned that there was a time when there were 2 clubs. What transpired? Why was there a need for 2 clubs, or it just happened?
Great question, and we get that a lot. And at this stage of the game, there are very few, and I say very few, literally could probably count on one hand the number of members who were around and involved in Kenosha Rotary or Rotary in general at that time. So again, my recollection and understanding of what I've heard, history I've heard over the years, is that sometime in the early 70s, the 2 clubs split, or the one club, which was known as Kenosha Rotary, saw a group leave and form another club. Now, to be clear, there are municipalities or areas across the country and the world that have multiple Rotary clubs in a single city, in cities that can support it and maybe have the population and the business entities to be able to do that. We, at the time, in hindsight now, certainly were vibrant enough in Kenosha, had the commitment of a number of people committed to the mission of Rotary that they supported 2 clubs for the longest time. And again, at that point, we each had memberships well in excess of 150 people. My understanding is that the issue, like in any organization, there was a little bit of a difference in opinion on the direction that they thought maybe the club should be going, or some of the events they should be working on, or some of the vision about where they should be headed as an organization. So a group then formed that second club. We were meeting on Tuesdays, they met on Thursdays. At that time, we met every Tuesday and every Thursday. Again, we had our events that we did, raised a great deal of money, and granted out well in excess of $1 million over the history of our club to various nonprofits in the community. In Kenosha West, as they were, Rotary West, Kenosha Rotary West, as they were known at that time, did the same thing through a couple of events that they held, inclusive of their Rotary softball tournament, which continues to this day.
Okay, so you mentioned that their main fundraiser was the softball tournament.
Yes.
Is that still going on today?
It is. In fact, we're in the, I say we, and again, as we've talked, the clubs are now back under a single umbrella, back under the umbrella of Kenosha Rotary. It was a long time in coming, but the right opportunity now with some of the pressures that any organization like Rotary has to attract and maintain and retain members. So we couldn't be more pleased to be back under a single umbrella. You mentioned the Rotary softball tournament coming up in July. We are in the middle of promoting and organizing and preparing for that event. So I think it looks to be shaping up to once again be a phenomenal weekend. And softball in Kenosha is not dead by any stretch. It's a long history of softball in Kenosha and Kenosha County.
So you mentioned that, okay, I mentioned that the club has the softball tournament. You mentioned that the 2 clubs came back together. Was this a long process? Was this something that just became a realization and then they merged? How did that reconnection develop?
I'll tell you a couple of things, and again, it's a perfect storm. It's the right time. It was just an opportunity that presented itself. It was some of the pressures that are out there. Our club was certainly falling in numbers in terms of those that were in it. Our membership was aging for the longest time. We were a club that had many, many senior members in it just because of the history of our club. And these are members that to either the day that they just simply couldn't be involved any longer, or truly to the day they passed as a Rotarian, were committed and involved in every step of the way and in every process and every effort that we put together. Just phenomenal men and women across the board. And then Kenosha West, similarly, they had some pressures on maintaining memberships and attracting new members as well. And it just got to be that a member from each club would have a conversation. Jesus, seems kind of silly that we're both trying to manage the same opportunities here and promote the same issues here. Maybe we should have a conversation. 2 other members might talk, and one would carry it back to their respective club. And through that process of friends talking to friends, it grew into a discussion that led to some formal conversations, formally informal, I'll say, and it just was apparent that this was the right time for us to consider it. And I talk about it being the right time because there is, and has been for a long time, myself included, as a nearly 30-year member of the club, a fair amount of baggage associated with that split, even though I wasn't a member, certainly for many, many years after that separation. But you hear things over the years, and you develop your own thoughts and reasons for why things went the way they went. So some of us needed to get over that hurdle, and again, myself included. I'm certainly more than pleased that we were able to do it, and happy that we're together. We have a new vibrancy in our club that we haven't had in a long, long time.
Who were the driving forces behind the merger?
Boy, I can tick off a few. So just from the Rotary West side, Christian Venegas was certainly a huge leader in that effort. Laura Shoemaker was another one that promoted and pushed that extensively. On our side, our recent past club president was instrumental in making that, having those conversations, Jim Thompson. Am I correct? Jim Thompson, yes. And Rita Hagan was another one, had a number of conversations. Rita is just a dynamite addition. She's been in our club for many years now as well, but boy, she gets involved in anything and everything, and if she's involved, it's head in the right direction. So those are the types of people that we need and continue to have, making Rotary the great place that it is.
Did you have to come up with new classifications because you would have had similar?
Yeah, not so much, because again, I think at this stage, 103 years into the effort of promoting goodwill around the community and elsewhere, the rules of Rotary, like everything else, have gotten a little looser than they used to be. And you know how that happens in any historic or long-standing organization like that. All the rules sound great, but if you're not changing and being flexible as times change, historically, you're going to fail and you'll never survive. So I think Rotary's slowly begun to understand that, and there are no issues. I think we just printed new badges, and classifications are the classifications.
You mentioned women joined in the mid to late 70s. Was this something that Rotary International or National said, maybe you should invite women in the club, or was this a local decision only? How does that work?
It's a great question, and I don't know the specific answer to it, other than to say there was some hesitation both locally and internationally, and I would maybe hesitate to say, but I don't know that I'm far off. And of course, in this day and age of being able to just say whatever you want on camera, and someone tells you believes it's the truth, right? I'll take the leap and say I think Rotary International had a bit more of a pushback than some of the local clubs did. I believe our first female member of the club was Donna Wolf Steigerwald, who, of course, as we all know, ran and operated Jockey for the longest time, but was clearly engaged in the community in a significant way, met all of the tenets of Rotary in every aspect. Why on earth would you not want someone like that to be involved in an organization like Rotary?
Okay, and going back to fundraisers, Rotary West started the softball tournament. You mentioned that the downtown club, Kenosha Rotary, had a radio auction.
Mm-hmm.
These were biggest fundraisers of the clubs at that time.
Yes, we had two at the time. One was the auction, and the second one was our annual golf outing that benefited primarily CP Respite and other nonprofit organizations.
Okay, so you mentioned now that one of the benefits was that. What else were these funds used for specifically that people would say, I didn't know Rotary did that, or this is something that I can see Rotary did? I mean, what were some of those things?
A couple of big projects that I can look to and point to here around the community are Tots Park. That is a facility that Kenosha Rotary raised the majority, I believe all of the funds for, in cooperation with the city of Kenosha to get that.
And that is where?
That is down on the harbor, down on the lakefront. And I believe it's been built well in excess of 30 years now, 30 years ago, so it's been there for quite some time. Something that many people don't know is the first bookmobile that was rubber on the road here in Kenosha was funded by Kenosha Rotary. And for the longest time, that initial bookmobile was branded with our Rotary tag. Clearly, bookmobiles have changed and evolved over the many years since we funded that first bookmobile. But any number of organizations, nonprofit organizations, CAFASI, Kenosha Area Family and Aging Services, the Kenosha Achievement Center, many organizations have benefited from our grant process and grant application.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, I shouldn't forget this, Kemper Center. Our club donated right through a capital campaign effort within our organization in excess of $250,000 for the renovation of the conference center at Kemper Center. This goes back probably sometime late 90s when that commitment took place, and funded and honored every commitment that we made, and had Kemper Center as their home for many years after that.
You touched on other grants and maybe things that the club does. Can you talk a little bit about those? They're smaller things, but they're
sure,
significant.
absolutely. So at the end of, we just went through this process of awarding grants, and I believe we awarded somewhere in the range of $26,000 to, if memory serves me, maybe a dozen organizations that applied for our grant, and I think we had 60 grant applications, if I'm not mistaken. All of this I'm just going off of memory here as we're talking. So certainly the requests for support far outstrips the available dollars that we have. But in our case, we were able to help somewhere around 12 organizations here in the community as of last week.
Okay. And you also mentioned relationship with Kenosha Unified.
Yes.
So what programs associated with students do you participate in?
Sure. So historically, we've had a long relationship with Kenosha Unified. I think as far back as I can remember, the superintendent of the Unified School District has been a member of our club, and I believe it's a bit of a passing the baton year after year, or as tenures change, and it isn't so much of this is what you will do, but the history is shared and the obligation certainly is felt. So we love to have that support. But beyond that, we have been involved in doing what is known in our club as vocational awards every year, and these are recognizing students who are in the various vocation education tracks within Unified School District. We just within the last month awarded a considerable number of recognition certificates to students across the district. They are nominated by their teacher. It could be anything from the carpentry track vocation to child care to some of the STEM coursework that they have. And it's an event that we've been doing now for quite some time and look forward to it every year.
Do you award any scholarships?
We do. We're part of the George Taylor Scholarship grant process. We award 2 scholarships every year to 2 graduating seniors through an essay process. The essay topic is one that we select every year. We try to be timely in a international, certainly national, if not international, issue that might be out there. And we receive any number of applications or essays each year, and a group of us within the club, that might change year over year as well, read the essays and score them and vote. So those scholarships, I believe, are, don't quote me on this, but I believe the main scholarship is either 3 or 5, and then there's a second place scholarship as well. $1,000, that is.
Is this county-wide schools that participate in this essay process?
Well, I should know the answer to that question as well, shouldn't I? I believe it is, yes. Certainly it's Kenosha Unified School District. I don't recall if it's countywide now.
Okay, what types of projects do you participate in on the international level around Rotary International's mission and programs?
Absolutely. Rotary International has taken on several projects over the years, inclusive of providing clean drinking water wells in communities across the world, to providing medical assistance. So they'll send groups of doctors on mission trips that Rotarians can get involved in, participate in, and volunteer for. Their biggest push as of over the last maybe decade or so has been the eradication of polio. And they are at a point where they have all but wiped out polio across the world. And I say all but wiped it out. I think their thought process was that it was attainable to, in fact, eradicate polio by going into communities throughout the world, and certainly in the countries that don't have the abilities or don't have the capabilities to provide vaccinations on the scale and level that we do certainly here in the United States. But quickly found that it's difficult, right? So for any number of reasons, it could be there is a lot of certainly remoteness involved in getting to some of the villages that you need to get to. There's a fair amount of distrust. There's a fair amount of apprehension against vaccines that many of these communities just don't know much or anything about. So when I say all but eradicated it, I don't know that they'll ever truly get to that point, but it is at a stage right now. And some of the funds that came through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation over the years as well, match dollars that Rotary International then would continue to raise funds for. So those are some significant efforts that they've put together.
And how does the local club fit into the international programs?
Again, one of the interesting things about Rotary is it isn't just about raising funds at both the local and national, international level, which is certainly part of it, because that's without the dollars you can't accomplish what it is you're setting out to do. But it is also Rotarians from clubs worldwide, many from the United States obviously, being part of those mission trips in providing the physical hands-on inoculation efforts that go along with the effort of trying to eradicate polio.
So do local Rotarians go on mission trips?
Absolutely. We've seen that many times over the years from both clubs. And or there's also oftentimes our clubs will take on an international project. I know we have done over the years a solar cooking device, if you will, that we partnered up and made some effort to raise funds to purchase a certain number of those and distribute them throughout the communities in third world countries. And many of our Rotarians participated in making that happen both locally here and on the mission trips themselves to distribute them.
Do you involve students in international projects?
We have been involved in the Rotary Exchange program for many years. Our Kenosha Club, Kenosha Rotary Club, excuse me, I don't believe we've had a Rotarian exchange student now for a while. West, I believe, has pretty consistently maintained that program, and I don't know if they've fallen off prior to our clubs coming together here. But there is a long history of supporting the Rotary Youth Exchange program, both locally and internationally. And it really is just a spectacular opportunity for engagement across cultures, to house these students and support the students through Rotary and obviously through their host families. They stay engaged in Rotary while they're here, but it builds friendships and long-term connection to Rotary over their lifetime that is just fun to see when they come back or make connections, some 20 years after they were a youth exchange student and share some of their stories.
So the exchange students come from parents within Rotary, or do you select a student?
Not necessarily. Oftentimes there'll be some engagement with Rotary somehow, a parent or a relative that's been engaged in Rotary, but not all the time will it be a Rotarian family, I'll say, who the exchange student is coming from. But when it is, that connection is that much deeper at the beginning.
What are some of the challenges that Rotary clubs face today?
Challenges, boy, I mean, you know, this is really part of what got the discussion moving around bringing our clubs back together. It's just the pressures that everybody faces. You know, our days haven't gotten any longer, but boy, they sure seem to have gotten busier, right? The pressures of doing more at work, the pressures of what goes on outside of work, whether it be family, extracurricular activities. When my kids were all growing up, they played travel sports or were in the performing arts, and everything just took your focus away from, oftentimes, from your ability to have that extra time and motivation to be able to give back through your time in an organization like Rotary. So we face that continually. Then, of course, it's just the pressures of support from your employer and the organization you might be associated with. And then, again, just a little different mindset now amongst your millennials and others. You know, I don't know what generation we're even in right now. You've got Generation X, you've got boomers, you've got millennials. I can't keep up with, you need a scorecard to keep track of everything. So it's just a little bit different mindset right now that changes with every generation. It changes year to year, it changes decade to decade, and it's certainly beyond that. So we realize that Rotary for the longest time was a very traditionalistic organization. And it took Rotary International and local clubs some time to begin to understand that we needed to be a little bit more flexible, nimble, and change with the times if we wanted to continue to be successful.
You mentioned companies and sponsorship and members' dues. What does it cost for a Rotarian to be in a club?
I will say I believe, because I don't actually look at my bills all the time. I get it and throw it into the basket to be paid, but we are $185 a quarter right now. And that includes your local dues, your international dues, and it includes your meals that we partake in, obviously, every time we get together.
Okay, so company support, sponsorship is very helpful.
Well, certainly it gets expensive, and it's an expensive commitment to something that essentially is asking you to get engaged in a way that looks for you to volunteer time, looks to you to volunteer your talent, and obviously looks to you to volunteer your treasure as well in terms of supporting some of the efforts and events that we do. So you're paying to be asked to participate, and it's just a certain person that needs to understand that to make that commitment.
And so the company's sponsorship also includes, in the mindset of the company, flexibility for that employee to be able to participate in Rotary.
No doubt. That, and it's just really a mindset that certainly we have done this within our organization as well. Our commitment to individuals, and we've had myself and one of my business partners have been involved in the two clubs over time. But it's also understanding that if we are going to commit to an employee being part of Kenosha, part of Rotary in general, it's really a corporate-wide commitment, and we have tried to demonstrate that ourselves over the tenure of both my partner and I being in Rotary.
You mentioned earlier that you have many members that have been long-standing Rotarians.
Mm-hmm.
How long has someone stayed a Rotarian?
Oh,
Starting to ending to?
Yeah, that's a great question. We currently, I believe, our oldest tenured member, longest tenured member, he may also be the oldest, at least in our club, is Dr. Cliff Peterson. And I don't remember the specific numbers, but I'm certain he has been a Rotarian in excess of 50 years. And several of our members who have passed away in recent years, it was, many of them were in excess of 40, 50 plus years in Rotary.
Does it happen that being a Rotarian is a generational kind of? You mentioned that certain positions
Yes.
seem to take on the next person in that job
Sure.
as a Rotarian. Does this happen also family-wise?
It does. You know, I've said that Rotary, quite honestly, as I look at some of the members of our club that we've had over the years, is a fountain of youth, because we have members that are in their late 70s, 80s, and beyond, who are some of the most active men and women that I've known and come across, and their energy and passion around Rotary, in my opinion, is what keeps them young. To your specific question, one who I think is just an absolute epitome of what Rotary is all about is Steve Seymour. And Steve is not only a longtime Rotarian, past president of our club. His father was a longtime Rotarian, past president, and his grandfather was a longtime Rotarian. So that is a three-generation and continuing, I hope.
You also talked about how one becomes a member of Rotary, being invited, sponsored.
Mm-hmm.
Do people ever call up and say, hey, is there an opening for me?
They do. And in today's climate, I think we probably see more of that. So at one point in time, a sponsorship to join Rotary, you had no idea. It needed to, the requirement was that it would be anonymous. So if I wanted to sponsor someone into Rotary, that individual wasn't aware. The sponsorship would be made, the decision would be voted upon, and then that individual would be informed that they have been invited to join Rotary. Today it's I don't know if it's a 50-50 or 70-30 one way or the other, but we have a fair number of members who are just aware of Rotary, or maybe relocated from another. Right, there's much more transient movement amongst professionals today in terms of taking jobs in new places. So when they move to a different community, they might be leaving a Rotary club, and then they'll just reach out and ask to join our club.
What is the future of Rotary? How do you see it?
I think the future of Rotary is incredible and extremely bright as compared to where we were even so much as a few years ago. You know, our conversation, and I'm not a pre-COVID, post-COVID guy per se. I realize there's reality to that, but right around COVID and shortly thereafter, our conversation with our club was whether we were going to look for a way to continue or simply say, hey, it's been a great run, and call it a day. So I think there's just a new energy around Rotary. For us to be part of having brought the two clubs back together gives me a certain sense of satisfaction as having played some small part in that. And I mentioned the people that really drove that issue. But to be part of these meetings again, where we have a full room and there's a lot of conversation and there's a fair amount of new and new ideas around where we can get involved as a club and as an organization, how we can make an impact and how we can benefit Kenosha and beyond. It's just fun to be a part of again.
Well, thank you for joining me today.
It's my pleasure. Anytime we can talk, I can talk about Kenosha Rotary or Rotary in general, I'm happy to do it. So thank you.